Welcome back to Otaku no Videos. Always, thank you very much for joining me. Where today I am talking about the first 3 episodes of Soar High Isami, a kids show, a kids anime series from the mid-90s TV show, which caught my eye because it is partly directed by the director of Martian Successor Nadesico and Stelvia, 2 very popular series from the mid-90s. So I saw that that was, being done. This kids show was made by that guy, and it's about the descendants of the Shinsengumi. Now, the Shinsengumi I personally love. I think they're fascinating. Very briefly, the Shinsengumi is essentially an independent police force that volunteered in the mid-1800s and sort of brought itself up to sort of protect order and keep order during a very tumultuous time in Japanese history. And they're famous for the fact that they had these very high standards and they had these goals of keeping society together at a time when everything was collapsing, and it ended up, history kind of went against them. So they were upholding these values that were kind of outdated, unfortunately, as it turned out. But they stuck fast to that. So you can look at them as being foolish in a way, but also a lot of people look up to them for holding fast to those principles. So the main characters are 3 kids who all happen to be descendants of the Shinsengumi in the present day, well, mid-90s present day. And they stumble upon a bunch of stuff left over by the Shinsengumi for these descendants to for very mysterious reasons. And there's this cult that now wants to get this stuff that was left by the Shinsengumi. But these kids can now use this stuff, being descendants, and fight off this cult. Now, one thing actually I really appreciate, speaking of those characters, is that the main character is a girl, a very strong female character who actually has a sword. It's actually kind of a lightsaber, which is weird. But it's nice having this girl, spunky girl, as your main character in a kids show. The animation overall, fluid and kind of plastic, cartoony. I mean, this is a kids show, and so there's a lot of squash and stretch to the characters. Not ridiculously. I mean, it doesn't look like Warner Brothers or anything, but the creators clearly were not trying to stay exactly with human dimensions for every single shot. Sometimes there's some squash and stretch as appropriate to this kind of a series. Mostly on model, although for any show like this, that's not going to be there all the time. And sure enough, a few times when they're off model, that's fine. And a lot of frames of animation, particularly given what we're used to in terms of the number of actual drawings we get in a given anime series. This has quite a few, but again, this is the first 3 episodes. You may be wondering why I'm reviewing only the first 3 episodes. I'll get to that in a bit. Now, the direction, which for me was interesting given the director, was quite dynamic for a kids show. There's a lot of unusual camera angles and a lot of attention played to light, particularly with the kids or the scene is set in the morning or the afternoon or the evening or at night or indoors or outdoors. Light falls differently and illuminates things differently at different times of the day. And so you see that definitely paid attention to in the overall artwork, which again I appreciated. And it moves quite quickly, the story does. That actually is a bit of a problem in the fact that the pacing is fast, and that's something that the director did very well on Nadesico, for example, is that you keep moving, you just keep on moving, and especially for a kids show, that's good. However, that means it's a much more plot-driven series than a character-driven series. They set things up so that you can then have your villain of the week. Now, there are some interesting backstory elements that delve into that. The main character, her father has disappeared, presumed dead, but there's a whole backstory revolving around that. So clearly there are other elements going on here, and that's nice, but again, it's all kind of set up for plot. And there's not too much dealing with the main character in all that, at least at this point. So it's kind of villain of the week, which is unfortunate. Now, the kids and their relationships are kind of set up for plot. They do squabble quite a lot in the first episode, but they do become a pretty solid team. Pretty much after the first episode is over, episode 2, episode 3, they're all working together pretty well, which I appreciate. I get frustrated when kids or when any sort of group of heroes are arguing constantly and they're all squabbling all the time. It's okay if they're discussing things, it's okay if they're rivalries and so forth, but if they're always screaming at each other and they're always kind of don't like each other, that gets old really quickly for me. So seeing them work things out, I think that's a really good thing. Again, the problem is that because it kind of pushes that to the side so that they can kind of get on with the plot, it becomes kind of a plot-driven story. Now, the overall setup, as I mentioned, is a bit hard to swallow. The fact that the Shinsengumi left behind all this stuff in a basement and their descendants were able to get it and they all happen to live in the same area and all that kind of stuff, and the fact that it still works and all that stuff is a little over the top in terms of believability. On the other hand, this is a kids show, so it's there just as a premise. So you have to accept the fact that you're watching a kids show, and that's the reason that I only watched the first 3 episodes. I got 3 episodes in, and I was like, there's really nothing here to suck me in and to keep me watching, except for one thing that did catch my eye, which was the fact that the writing overall makes it clear the fact that this is a serious situation the kids are in. In fact, in episode 3, the villain repeatedly tells the main character, the main girl, I'm going to kill you. He's trying to kill the girl. And for elementary school characters and an elementary school audience, that's more than you normally see. Obviously, in American animation, typically there is no mortal threat to the characters. And in Japan, while there may be an implied threat of death, it's rarely said directly to the characters. You know, it's rarely made explicit. You know, I'm going to kill you now. So that was interesting, and I think that is an important callback to the original Shinsengumi, the fact that they were going out with swords against other swordsmen, sword fighters, in putting their life on the line in pretty much every day for their values. And so the fact that that is reflected back in this series, the fact that this is not just kids bouncing around on an adventure, but they are facing this sort of mortal danger from these cultists, I think was an interesting direction to take it in, and I appreciate that. But other than that, it's kids with these special things fighting off cultists, and it just didn't really do much for me. I may watch more, but that's what it is those elements. So fair enough. Not saying it's bad, just saying that I'm probably not going to watch more of it, but I wanted to at least get this much out there. Now, it was licensed in North America, so you can certainly find it out there. Pretty much everything else about it, by the way, is perfectly fine. You know, voice acting, music, all that kind of stuff. No complaints. Just nothing really to comment on. So it was licensed in North America, released on DVD. You can find the discs online used pretty easily, so that's not a problem. I got mine for I think $3 for that disc. That's fine, whatever. So you can certainly find it. I don't know if the entire thing was released over here, but certainly several discs of it were. So hey, if you want to check it out, it is certainly out there. And for a kid show, for a fun adventure of the week kind of kid show, certainly a solid series, and certainly something that I would loan to a kid to watch, as long as they understood that there is that kind of mortal danger there, and as long as it's not for really young kids, for example. I think it'll make a really fine series, and hopefully it does pay off. But unfortunately, there's too much other interesting stuff out there to find out. So sorry, Soar High Isami. So that's what I think, and if you want to see if Soar High Isami is out there streaming legally, please stop by streamsuki.com, where I have that. And if you want to talk about this, please stop by otakunovideo.net, where we discuss cool anime and manga, interesting anime and manga all the time. So that's it. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time. On a courtyard?